Hey besties, welcome back. If you guys didn't see in the background, we have a new addition. It's the Peep. I call him Big Peep. He's so cute. Every morning when I'm a little bit lazy before work, because I wake up like 30 minutes before my shift and I work from home, I will really lay on this Peep for 5 minutes, then get dressed and get ready because it's so comfortable and so cute. Today, we have a true crime story for you guys today. This is one of the bigger ones in the nation. If you really take a look at any of the news in southern states, like I just moved to Texas, you'll see that it's all over the Texas news. Like these trials are everywhere. And it all starts off on July 8th of 2015. So on July 8th of 2015, the cops get a call. They're like, who's this? It's some guy. He's like, hey, there's a kid in the middle of the road with blunt force trauma. His head looks like he's bashed in. I don't know if he got hit by a car or what. And the cops are like, okay, that's weird. Like, let's go down and let's like take a look. Like, let's see what's going on. And so they take a look and it looks like he has no rips on his clothing, no rips on anywhere. His shoes were loose fitted shoes. They're not thrown and scattered. You think if you got hit by a car, your shoes would go flying if they're loose. I mean, if you're wearing flip-flops or if you're wearing high heels and get hit by a car, odds are it's gonna come off. And I don't think it was a flip-flop. I'm pretty sure it was a sneaker, but it still would come off if you were hit by a car, just saying. His car was found down a windy road just around the corner from him, and he was found out of his car in the middle of the road with blunt force trauma to the head. Now, what could cause this? This looks like something happened. He got beat up, he got hurt, he got hit. You can't even know, you can't tell. He definitely did not get hit by a car. By what like people who do crime scene analysis, by what forensic people have said, they said that there's no way he would have been hit by a car because he didn't have any bodily harm. Like it was only his head, majority of it, and then there was like blood pattern stains all over him, but there was no like scratches, skid marks. Like you would think if you got thrown down or, you know, pushed down the stairs or pushed down the road, you would get some sort of like rub on you, like road rash or something like that. He didn't have any of that, which is very interesting to prosecutors and cops. So his mother, Sandy Smith, goes and she hires a PI and she's like, I want to know what happened to my baby. And everyone in town is like, yeah, we want to know what happened to this kid. He is a young man, he is gay, and they were saying that he was one of the only kids who was out in their town. So let's get into Low Country, South Carolina. So in Low Country, South Carolina, just like all my other stories that I like to talk about, if you notice, a lot of the stories that I talk about pertain to small cities or small towns. Low Country, South Carolina, everybody knows this family, the Murdaughs. So the Murdaughs, they are number one in the town. They own a law firm, and the law firm was made by their great-great-grandfather. And so it's like great-great-grandfather, grandfather, the dad, Alex. So the grandfather's name, I think it's Randall Murdaugh, and then there's Alex Murdaugh. Then there's Paul and Buster. Buster's the older brother, Paul's the child, the younger child. So that's how many people in this town are in the Murdaugh family, like just the men alone. And Buster was studying to become a lawyer. Paul was not. Paul was the younger son, but it was like Buster, his dad Alex, and his father were two of the main lawyers in town. And if you know the Murdaughs, you know that they were in touch with everyone. They were in touch with the law departments, the police forces, the DEA, like anyone who came into the town for any sort of cases, any legal actions, any judges, any prosecutors. The Murdaughs knew them because they were part of the court cases and they were everyone's lawyer. Everyone knew them and they ran the town practically. People were afraid of them. So when they had found out that a teacher told the PI and told a few investigators that allegedly a lot of the students believed that Buster, who was the head lawyer's son, had relations with the boy who was hit by the car, they were like, wow, Steven and Buster must have had a relationship. Something would happen with Buster's family because they're head up, and this is all alleged, and Steven got killed. That's the story. People said that Steven had gotten picked up by Buster and his friends that night and that ended up with a blunt force trauma. Nobody knows what happened. To this day, it's inconclusive. So 3 years later, on February 2nd, 2018, they have a live-in maid. Her name is Gloria Shatterfield, and Gloria is a sweetheart. Everyone in the town knows her as Miss Gloria. She's the Murdaugh's like maid, handy woman. Like, she's their right hand. She worked for the company for, he said in the documentary that I watched that was on Netflix and a few other documentaries, Alex Murdaugh said that Gloria, their live-in maid, worked for them for years. It was basically her nanny, her maid. Like, she took care of his younger son Paul. She took care of the house. She made sure certain things were like taken care of. She did all of their arrangements. She was that person. And so Alex and Maggie, Maggie's his wife. You have Maggie the wife, Alex Murdaugh's wife. Then you have Alex, and then you have their two sons, Buster and Paul. So that's the family living in this house. And there's a caretaker. We're in charge of taking over the entire house and just making sure everything is taken care of. So the caretaker would take care of the grounds and basically like a groundskeeper, and making sure the bushes were trimmed and like the grass was cut and so this story pertains to all of these people. Just get ready. It's going to be well read and there's going to be a lot of names. So please just bear with me because it's going to be a lot. So 911 receives a call, right? They receive a call that Gloria, the live-in maid, had fallen. And this is from Maggie, the wife. And she says, oh my God, she fell. Like, she's on the floor, like she won't get up, and she's mumbling. And so 911 is like, okay, how did she fall? Where is she? Like, asking all of these questions. And Maggie seems to get frustrated. So it seemed like she was a little bit on edge during this moment, and Gloria was on the floor, and she said that Gloria's head had been bleeding a little bit. So that was interesting. We can't say, but the younger son, Paul, had grown up with Gloria, and he was distraught. Gloria was like his second mom, right? But then rumors started going around the town. Gloria knew too much. Gloria, she may have found something. Maybe she did something that pissed the Murdaughs off. Everyone involved with the Murdaughs, something bad happens to them. And the whole town of Low Country, South Carolina, goes through this entire thing, freak out, saying, what happened? Like, Gloria had to know something. She had to do something. And it's very strange because rumors start going around that Paul or Maggie may have murdered Gloria. And this is alleged, but these are the rumors that were happening around the town. So when cops actually arrived to the scene and the ambulance, they said that her feet were above her head, which is an interesting position for someone who's fallen. After a lot of people years later spoke with the groundskeeper individual, he said that it was weird because Alex had called him over and said to help him move Gloria to be horizontal so that she wouldn't be like having any issues, like to just help pick her up, right? And when he came to the scene, he said that Alex had not gotten yet to the scene. He was there before him. But when 911 came and when Alex started saying what happened to Gloria, he said that he spoke to her and she said that she tripped over the family dog, which doesn't make any sense if he hadn't yet arrived. And the groundskeeper thought that too. So if you ever watch the Netflix documentary or you see some of these interviews with the groundskeeper, he was confused about that. And that just shows how the topic about Gloria's death is so vague and nobody really, Another thing that happened was Morgan, who's the younger son Paul's girlfriend. There's going to be a lot of names, so please bear with me. Morgan is Paul's girlfriend, and Paul's the younger son. So Morgan had said that Miss Gloria had found some drugs taped underneath Alex's bed, which is like, I don't know, like Alex Murdaugh had drugs taped under his bed, and she had told Paul, hey, you need to watch your dad. I think he's back on drugs. And so Paul allegedly went with Morgan and they helped his dad, Alex Murdaugh, detox from drugs. And this is all something that Morgan said happened, and Paul was forcing his dad to stop doing drugs because of Miss Gloria. So people wonder if that was a motive of Alex to have Gloria murdered because she knew that he was addicted to those pills, allegedly. This is all so weird because after that happened and Gloria had passed in the hospital from her brain injury that she had, her family came to visit her and they said that she was incoherent before she died. There was nothing, like she couldn't say anything. They didn't know what happened. Nobody knew besides the Murdaugh's story. That's all everyone knew. So the family later finds out that Alex Murdaugh himself sued himself to get an insurance claim. And I think it was a couple million. It was upwards of $500,000 to a couple million. He had sued himself gotten the money and never gave it to her family. He's never given it to her family. So her family just suffered with her, paid for her funeral or whatever, and suffered with her death, and didn't get any of the money from the lawsuit that Alex made from suing himself. This will later all come back when Alex is on trial, and you'll see that he has committed tons of fraud and he's gotten so many financial charges. He probably will never get out of jail because of how many financial charges he got. Another interesting thing is that no autopsy was done on Gloria's body, and they had ruled it as just like a regular death. They got approval for it to be exhumed, which means they take the body out and they review it. And what I saw on some sketchy sites were that she had not only some broken ribs, but some head trauma. I don't know how reliable those sources are because it was things like the Daily Mail, and I don't really trust those sources. But then another news article came out and said that Gloria had gotten into a car accident the day before she fell. So they were saying that it could have been residual wounds from the car accident that were opened up when she fell, and maybe that's why she had so much trauma and bruising and head injuries and ribs. But still, people were saying that someone who's hit by a car and then falls down the stairs, are they really going to have that many, health conditions that cause them to pass? But I think we also have to look at Gloria's age, and there's so many factors in this that we really can't rule whether or not the Murdaugh family killed her, or if it was a family, if it was just a spontaneous death, I guess. But at the same time, what Alex Murdaugh did, suing himself and not giving the family any money, that just puts it over the top into saying maybe it was them. That just puts it over the top. So you know how I mentioned the younger son, Paul, right? And Paul Murdaugh was the youngest son of the Murdaugh family, so he's the younger kid. Everyone kind of looked at him like he was more of the black sheep. He wasn't as formal as his older brother, Buster. He didn't want to go to college. He didn't have as much drive and motivation as Buster. And everyone said he was the black sheep because he wasn't taking the same way of life. And I know people do this all the time. You see one brother who's super successful, and then the other brother's like a fisherman or a tradesman, and everyone's like, oh, the other boy's he's dumb, he's not smart. And they kind of berate him and make him feel lesser than because he doesn't have as much, degree or money as his brother. And obviously to Paul, that was probably very hurtful, especially with the town's ties to his family and all of that. But Paul struggled a lot. He struggled a lot because Maggie, his mother, wasn't really there for him throughout his childhood. It was always Miss Gloria. From what reports had said and what his friends had said, it didn't seem like Maggie loved him. She loved keeping the family name. She loved Buster because he was going to be a lawyer and be successful and follow in his father's footsteps. And Paul suffered from that younger child syndrome, where it's like, you don't get any attention, nobody cares about you, you're the last and final kid, nobody really cares, and you have to kind of raise yourself. So Paul began to drink alcohol at a very young age. His girlfriend Morgan had said that her best friends, Mallory and Miley, so it's Morgan, Mallory, and Miley, which this is going to get into a lot of names. Morgan, Mallory, and Miley were all best friends. Morgan was dating Paul, Mallory is dating Anthony, and Miley dates a boy named Conor. So it's going to be a lot of names. They said that when Paul drinks, he becomes Timmy, which Timmy's like his alter ego. So everyone's like, oh my god, Timmy's like so crazy, like he's acting up, he's Timmy. And they're making up all these things, and every time they party, they're like, blame it on Timmy. But Morgan, whose boyfriend is Paul, she starts to realize there's a whole other side to him. He is hitting her, physically abusing her, verbally, telling her things like her father could never pay the bills, he doesn't make enough to support her family, and whenever he gets drunk, he's out of control. He wants to drive his car. He actually went off on an excursion with Morgan in the car, insisted that he drove the car while he was drunk, crashed it into an embankment, and then he called his grandfather and his mother, so Maggie and his grandfather, Murdaugh, to come and pick them up. Morgan, who's his girlfriend, tried to call 911 and say, Paul's drunk, I don't know what's happening. She didn't get to call 911 because he said, stop, I'm going to call my mom and my grandfather and they're going to take care of this. They yelled at Morgan for calling 911 and being scared for her own life, and they ended up towing the car. So they towed the car, put it back into a tow truck, and basically just like act like never happened, and just got rid of the car and bought a new one. And they told Morgan that she never needs to call 911 because she could have ruined Paul's life. So her life doesn't matter. Her being scared or anything happening, him killing someone, none of it matters. You want to know why? Because all they care about is Paul and the Murdaugh name. They do not care about anything else throughout the story. And you're going to see this reoccurring theme that everyone in Low Country, South Carolina, say that the Murdaughs only care about their name and their family and how it looks and the looks of it. So this happens multiple times in the story. And as you just saw, Morgan's life was threatened and Paul gets away with it. On February 23rd, 2019, Morgan, Mallory, Miley, Anthony, Conor, and Paul, all 6 teenagers, decide that they're going to go down to the Oyster Roast. And what is the Oyster Roast, you ask? Well, guess what? The Oyster Roast is where all of these people get together and they put some oysters under some blankets, and it's really cold out, and they roast these oysters and they eat them because they're super warm from the fire underneath, and they get roasted and they taste so good, and you're cold and you're having something warm, and they have warm drinks, they have alcohol, they have just fun everywhere, fun for everyone. So they decide they're gonna go ahead and do this. And what can be seen on tapes at a local convenience store nearby, Paul purchased $50 in alcohol under Buster's ID. So Paul was using his older brother's ID because he was not yet 21. They're all around 18, 19 years old. So they're very, young. They're not 21 yet, but they all drink. They've been partying, they've been drinking. You see it all over Snapchat, Facebook. Paul is known as the local celebrity because he's a drinker. He parties every weekend. He has everyone in his little shacks on his land partying, and his dad owns acres and acres of land. So it's so much area for them to party. I mean, what more can you want? You're 19, 18 years old. You just get out of high school and you can just party. You can just party on acres of land. He had quads. He had a airplane that actually flew into a garage that would close up. He had multiple cars. He had all different types of assault rifles, shotguns, fishing stuff. He had boats. This was Paul and his family's playground. What more could a country-loving, fishing boy love? You can fish, you can quad, you can go on a boat, you can do whatever you want. You can drink beer. He had anything he wanted at his fingertips. And as you can see that night, he could not stop drinking. So Paul decides that he wants to go down to the Oyster Roast by boat. While everyone else is saying, hey, it's kind of cold out, maybe we should go by car, maybe we shouldn't go. Paul's like, no, I'm gonna go by boat. I really want to go by boat. We should all go down by boat. So they all decide to board Paul's boat. They end up docking the boat and they all start funneling beer, having some drinks, and all just relaxing. But it was really, really cold, and so people kept saying, can I drive you home? Can we drive you home? Can we drive you home? And Paul insisted, no, we're gonna take the boat. Someone's gonna try and steal my boat, so I'm gonna have to drive it. And it's dark now, it's very late at night. And so they decide that they're gonna go to the Lutheran's bar, and actually everyone was against it besides Paul and Conor, but everyone had to kind of go because it's Paul's boat and they had to listen to Paul. So they ended up docking the boat to go to the bar, and they get in the bar and Paul starts drinking even more. He's drinking heavily and excessively. He drank so much that when he was in there, people started asking, do you need a ride home? Nothing. As Paul walks out of the bar, he can be seen, I think he threw a chair. It was like he threw it or he kicked this chair out of the way, and they get into the boat. As they get into the boat, Conor is not drunk as much as anyone. Conor and Anthony are not that drunk. They had 1 or 2 drinks maybe. Paul was the one who went overboard. So Paul did not want to leave his boat, and he also didn't want anyone else to drive it. So Conor kept insisting that he would drive. So Conor, whenever Paul is on the boat, Paul starts drifting off. He would walk away. He would leave the steering wheel unattended. And if you know a boat, it's going to move. It's going to slowly drift. It's going to drift because it's in the waves. So Paul decided that he was going to leave the steering wheel unattended, and he went to go and just drink some more. So Conor starts slowly pushing it back to where it's supposed to be, and Paul starts to get infuriated by this, and he starts to get more and more and more and more mad. And they all start arguing and becomes a big argument. Paul stopped letting him drive, and so Paul gets really, really mad at Morgan, his girlfriend, and he's like, why aren't you defending me? So then everyone's screaming. It's a whole mess. They're going left and right and up and down, and they're screaming. And Paul gets really mad at Morgan, and he's drunk, and she doesn't want him to drive because he's drunk, and she's like, why would I want my boyfriend to drive drunk? We're gonna die. So then Morgan basically just looks up at him, and she's crying. And you know what he does? He's not a good boyfriend. He doesn't try to comfort her. He doesn't say, hey, Morgan, let me give you a hug. No, he smacks Morgan in front of everyone and starts calling her terrible things and saying terrible things to Morgan. So everyone noticed it. Everyone's like, okay, we just need to get home. Like, we need to save this poor girl. As they're turning, all of a sudden, they hear a big crash and then screams. Everything's dark. It's nighttime. Anthony is suddenly in the water. Mallory is nowhere to be found. Anthony's screaming for Mallory. Conor had hurt his jaw. He broke his jaw on this, it's like a little center console area. He broke his jaw. Miley is, kind of shaked up and rattled. And Morgan had gotten her fingers, the skin went back on her fingers because it got caught between the bridge that they hit. Sorry, I didn't mention. They hit a bridge and the boat. Her fingers got caught between the bridge and the boat, and her fingers' skin went all the way back. Paul's perfectly fine. He's perfectly fine. He's walking around in his underwear. He takes off his clothes at some point, and he's walking around in his underwear. And the very, very sad part that really made my heart hurt is that Conor began to call 911, and you can hear in the background Morgan and Miley's screams for Mallory. They are screaming for Mallory, and you can hear Anthony's screams. Like, this is something that traumatized me when I listened to and I saw the 911 tapes also, because the cops came and you can see their body cam footage. You can see Anthony is distraught. He's like, if my girlfriend died because of you, Paul, you need to all go to hell. And Anthony, his shoulder blade is out of its socket. His shoulder dislocated. You know what he does? He goes back in the water to search for Mallory for another minute, comes back up, gets out of the water, breathes, goes back in. And he's screaming for Mallory. And he goes back in multiple times. Anthony, who's Mallory's boyfriend, did not leave the spot that he was in after the accident. He never left her. And they said that he had to go to the hospital. He didn't care. He ignored any medical treatment. He ignored any treatment at all from his family. He had some hugs and he had some love from his family, but he was distraught because he lost his girlfriend. And he said at one point in the Netflix documentary, if Mallory came out of the water right now, alive, magically by the grace of God, I would marry that woman because I loved her. And that was so sad. Like, when I was watching the documentary, my blood was boiling because Paul had barely any remorse for what had happened to Mallory. And it seemed like Paul's family also had no remorse for what happened to Mallory once we get into that part. So once the ambulance and the first aid and first responders all start showing up, Paul starts blaming this on Conor. And he says that Conor was driving. But later on, we're going to see that when, I think it's biomechanical engineers reviewed how Conor would have gotten that broken jaw if he was driving. It's impossible because the steering wheel was here and he was here and got hit this way. So there's no way that something on this side would have broken if Conor was driving. It had to have been Paul driving because he was not hurt. He was immaculate. He was perfectly fine. So later on that gets debunked, and Paul actually does get in a lot of trouble for lying. He basically lies about Conor, and they try to frame Conor for being the driver when he really wasn't. Mallory was nowhere to be found. She was nowhere to be found. Nobody knew what happened. There was a large crash. Mallory's gone. The water and the current was going so fast. It's cold. It's night. They said they couldn't take the helicopters out because it was too foggy. They said they couldn't take the ships out barely because the divers can't see. The divers need to be able to see in the water. They could barely see. It's pitch black dark, and the divers also can't go in that current. So Anthony is distraught. Everyone starts calling their parents after they first responders camp, and Anthony had called his parents and he just kept saying, you know, Mallory is gone, we can't find Mallory, we can't find Mallory. And his mom said he wouldn't stop repeating, we can't find Mallory. Like, he didn't care about himself, he didn't care about his friends, all he cared about was Mallory. And so Mallory's parents actually barely got the call. Nobody wanted to call Mallory's parents. Obviously, the kids' parents did, and they asked the first responders and the cops, should we call Mallory's parents? Like, what should we do? And they were like, I don't know. Like, let's just wait a little bit. Like, the kids at the hospital and their families began to call Mallory's parents, but at the scene, none of the cops decided that they were going to ever call Mallory's parents, and none of the cops did, which is really interesting because later on we're going to see that the cops tried to interfere with who gets talked to in the hospital, and the Murdaughs start to act very coldly towards Conor because they're going to say that Conor was driving the boat. So now that they're all taken to the hospital, besides Anthony, you can see that Morgan was in the hospital, and you know what I said about her fingers, they were caught. After Morgan's all taken care of, she's doing well, a nurse actually sits down with Morgan's mother, which Morgan's mom is an RN as well, and the nurse says, do not let her near Paul. I don't trust Paul. You don't need her next to that man. He is trouble. A male nurse actually walks in and tells Morgan that she should not be with Paul. That Paul is bad news, he's not good for her. And so that's two people in one day telling Morgan that Morgan or her family, that they do not need Morgan to be with Paul because he is abusive, he's nasty, and he's entitled. So that just shows that people on the outside could see what was happening to Morgan and the abuse and how bad it was. So one interesting thing is at the hospital, you can see that Paul's dad, Alex, decided to come around and he went room to room and he said that he would represent the children for speaking. And then he also said that it's okay that Conor did it. Like, we all understand. We're going to make sure that Conor's protected. So he was acting like Paul wasn't driving. Even though he probably knew Paul was driving, he was basically putting it all off Conor and even telling Conor's family, like his mom and dad, like, we're going to take care of this. We're going to squash this out. And so it's very interesting by what he was doing. He was basically planting some seeds and manipulating the situation to control the situation and make sure that nobody said Paul was driving the boat, because they were so afraid that Paul was going to get this terrible representation for the Murdaugh's name. So all of the town begins to rally behind Mallory. They want to find Mallory. Finding Mallory is so important. Like, we're really worried about Mallory. Everyone cares about her. Everyone, you know what, except Paul's family. Paul's family is like, we're so glad our baby boy is alive. He's here, he's well, he's doing great. I really, really don't want anything to happen to Paul. Oh, Mallory? Oh yeah, I heard that she got lost. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. So Anthony went back to the site, like I said, every day. He prayed for her, he worried about her. Anthony really cared about his girlfriend Mallory. Miley was best friends with Mallory since they were little girls, probably since kindergarten. She said they were best friends. So Miley was the most distraught. Morgan came in later, during high school age or middle school age. She was an older friend for them. But Miley and Mallory were inseparable as children. So Miley was distraught, and I just feel so terrible for Miley because she's like, why did this have to happen to Mallory? After Mallory's mom got the call, she had went down to the site the next day to kind of survey and see if she can look at the area of where her daughter may have gone overboard. So she walks over to the boat and she noticed that there's actually a police officer just standing in front of the tape of the boat being like, you cannot cross. So she asked the police officer, she's like, hey, why can't I cross this line? What's going on? And the cop is like, no, you cannot come in here. You're not allowed in here. And so she's like, okay. And Mallory's mom is so confused because you want to know what happens next? Maggie Murdaugh and Randolph, I think his name was Randolph Murdaugh, the grandfather, come in and they tow the boat away. So they basically just took evidence off the scene, towed it away, and didn't even care. So as I said, they were trying to frame Conor, which is Miley's boyfriend, for being the driver. And so the Murdaughs head down, to go and see Conor's parents. So the father invites Conor's dad out to be alone. So Alex Murdaugh invites Conor's dad to just go out together and, like, for old time's sake, sit in my house and drink a beer, even though they hadn't talked in 30 years. And he basically was hinting at, oh, Conor was driving, I'm so sorry. And he's like, Conor was not driving. He basically was trying to spin the narrative and make sure that Conor's dad would be okay with his son going to jail for something that Paul did. And he's like, absolutely not. My son was not driving this boat, okay? Your son was. So then Conor's mom, Maggie Murdaugh, runs into Conor's mom and starts saying, I wonder what's going to happen if nobody can find Mallory's body. Which is, like, insane, because now that's planting seeds in the town, being like, what if the Murdaughs, when her body flew overboard, what if they hid it? So that was planting seeds in everyone in the town's head, saying, what if maybe they hid Mallory's body? A week from the crash, local boaters near the area were actually just, you know, doing their thing, boating, and they had seen Mallory's body washed up, and so Mallory's body was found, and they ended up doing an autopsy. It seemed like she suffered from blunt force trauma from hitting a rock in the water and then flew downstream. So it was found downstream from where they had gotten into the crash. So it just kind of lines up, but Mallory did pass, and Anthony suffered from severe PTSD because of this. Every single night, Anthony would wake up thinking that he was in water and having night terrors, that he couldn't find Mallory. So Anthony had terrible PTSD from this, and it's just so sad. He had to end up sleeping in the living room with his mother because he couldn't be alone. Paul's blood alcohol content the night of the crash is actually 3 times the legal limit, which is insane. Like, for a boy who wasn't even that tall, wasn't even that big, 3 times the legal limit is crazy. Mallory's parents hire a law attorney named Mark Tinsley, and Mark Tinsley vows that he's going to solve this case. Mark Tinsley starts investigating, and that's when he hires those biochemical engineers to see where the bodies were placed, and there's no way Conor was driving. So he has it in the bag. He knows what happened. He knows that his blood alcohol content was 3 times the legal limit, but then he gets the call records between the police officers and Alex Murdaugh and all of the Murdaughs, and it looks like Alex Murdaugh was calling all of the police officers, all of the hospital people. Like, it looked like he was basically telling everyone, hey, Conor had drove the car, not my son Paul, to try and cover up the instance. But Paul is not invincible. Paul ends up getting charged with, it's like boating DUI resulting in death, and then 2, so it was like 1 count of the death, and then 2 counts of injuring people, which was Conor and Morgan, because Morgan's hand got caught in Conor's jaw. And so Paul gets those charges and he goes into hiding. Paul is depressed, he's sad, he barely even talks to anyone, but in the mugshot, he doesn't even look serious. He's wearing like a polo and khakis. Like, Paul is not treated like a regular prisoner throughout the trial. He has no jail time. He gets to just walk around free. He doesn't get any handcuffs. You know, they all just call it a big boating accident in town. And people still supported Paul after this boating accident, he called it. Basically, they all still party with him. They're all on Snapchat drinking with him. People were still supporting him, but not, you know, Morgan, Miley, Conor, or Anthony. They really, really missed Mallory, so they did not have it in their hearts to continue partying with Paul after that happened. And Paul, he tries to reach back out to them and kind of like, you know, ways his way in. They're like, no, we can tolerate you, you know, we'll see you in public and say hi to you, but Paul, we're no longer friends after what happened. You know, we can't even deal with this. And they had considered Paul one of their best friends, so it was very hard on, especially Miley. Paul wasn't her best friend, but, you know, Mallory was, so for Miley, it was very hard for her. Conor was very, very close to Mallory as well. In the documentary, he could barely even talk about what had happened to Mallory because he was very worried about it. Like, he just cares so much. For them, they were so hurt after this happened, and I can't even imagine what Mallory's family was feeling, because Paul almost got away with it, but that's all we know. So Paul's older brother Buster actually gets expelled from school for plagiarism. So their whole family starts crumbling down. Brother Buster gets expelled for plagiarism. Paul gets, like, basically boating DUI, boating resulting in injury, a bunch of charges. And then we're going to get into what Alex Murdaugh does next. This next part of the story is the main part of the story. So on June 7, 2021, this is the story right here. This is like the turning point where nobody even knew what was going on. At 4147 Moselle Road, Low Country, South Carolina, the 911 operators receive a call from Alex Murdaugh. And they're like, what happened? And he's like, oh my gosh, my wife and son have been killed. They're covered in blood. I don't know what happened. They've been killed. I went out to go take care of my parents and I just came back. He sounds distraught. The 911 operators are like, no way, this is Alex Murdaugh. Who would commit a double homicide at Alex Murdaugh's house, knowing well he had multiple guns, like everyone knew the Murdaughs. Who did it? Nobody knows. Paul and Maggie were the victims. His wife and his son. Buster's away at college or away somewhere else. He moved somewhere else. Nobody knew what happened. And so nobody had any clue. And you know what? The lawyers were barely even giving up any clue. The lawyers were telling reporters that he was in one hospital when he was actually in another hospital. And Alex Murdaugh basically said that he had taken a nap. He went to go take care of his mom and dad, which his mom and dad, one of them had dementia and the other one had like, I don't know, old age, like they're older. His father and his mother are older because Alex Murdaugh is an older man. So he basically said he went to go take care of them, came back, his son and wife are dead. Paul was shot once in the chest and once in like the side neck face area, like here. And Paul's face was unrecognizable. And Paul was actually shot with a shotgun. So that is why his face was unrecognizable. But Maggie was shot with a specific, what they call an assault rifle or an AR. And this AR that she was shot with, she was shot in the running position. And she was shot multiple times. So it's definitely weird because they say like if it's more shots, it's a crime of passion or someone that knew them. And why was she in the running position? Like it was weird. I don't know. It was definitely weird. The Murdaugh family then began. So the grandfather, Alex Murdaugh, everyone puts out this $100,000 ad in the paper being like, who shot Maggie and Paul? We need to know who shot them. I need to know. I don't know what happened. Puts out this huge thing, like this huge story. And you're like, what? Like, Alex didn't do it, and nobody believes that Alex didn't do it, but they're like, how would he do it? Like, how would he be pulling this off? So speculation turns on. Maybe it's the parents of the people in the boating accident. Maybe it's Anthony. Maybe it's this person. But they all start to get checked out. You know, Anthony's at work. Miley was at work. You know, Morgan's at work. Connor's at work. Little by little, every single person had an alibi. But Alex, why? Like, you were at your parents', where's the proof? So no shell casings were actually found at the scene of the murder, which is weird because, I don't know, he was shot with a shotgun and you think there would be shell casings, and then he, like the AR-15, I don't know, it's definitely interesting. And the type of AR and the type of shotgun that were used to commit the double homicide were actually owned by Alex Murdaugh. Like they had that gun in their house, those types, but they weren't turned into law enforcement. So I don't know why they didn't turn them in to, you know, print them or at least do something. And so the downfall of Alex Murdaugh begins. Alex Murdaugh calls 911 from the side of the road and said that someone just tried to kill him. But he said that it was this man, and this man was allegedly his drug dealer, and he does speak up and say that he sold drugs to Mr. Murdaugh multiple times, and he had said that Mr. Murdaugh asked him to shoot him and kill him and kind of framed it as like, it was supposed to be an assisted, a suicide. So he asked the guy to shoot him to put him out of his misery and kind of say like, hey, can you make this look like you killed me? And so the guy says he'll do it, but he said he never fired the gun, that Alex Murdaugh attempted his own life. So he ends up going to rehab a few months later because he is addicted to drugs, and this is his downward spiral. But while he's out there, they start to realize that money is going missing from his law firm. Millions of dollars are going missing. Money is being sent to this drug dealer in large amounts. And it's not enough to buy Oxycontin, methadone, any of that. It's a lot of money. It's way more than you would ever use for drugs. So he's sending all this money from his law firm to this drug dealer, and nobody knows where is it going to, what is it being used for. It's a very, very sketchy situation. And it seemed like Alex had committed suicide to make it look like he had gotten killed. Then when that failed, he went to rehab to kind of evade all of this stuff that was happening and kind of get over all of this. And then one of the very last parts of the story that I find crazy is there's this YouTuber, I think his name is Eric Allen, and Eric Allen is a YouTuber, and during this whole entire crime, he lives nearby. So he decides to stop by with his little car and his little drone, and he flies his drone over the Murdaugh household, and he hits record, and he starts recording for a couple of hours. You know, he's just relaxing, chilling. He's a YouTuber. He's living his life. He's recording the forest, recording, and he goes back home, and he's like, maybe I didn't get anything interesting. Nothing interesting happened. No police were there. Nothing cool. You know, I wanted to get some good footage, maybe for the news, maybe for my YouTube channel, because I do true crime. And guess what? He gets something. He's looking through the footage, and he notices that the grandfather, which is Randolph Murdaugh, or one of the family members, is loading guns into the car, gets guns and a hound dog, and goes to the car. It looks like they were hunting, but he doesn't have, like, where were those guns? Two of the guns look like they could have been guns used as murder weapons, which is super interesting. Were they hiding the murder weapons? Did they go dig a hole for them? Nobody knows. We don't know what happened. So then we found out that Alex is embezzling thousands of dollars, okay? So not only that, his wife, his son died, Mallory was passed, you know, the Gloria, and then Stephen Smith dies. So that's a lot of death tied to it. But he ends up, you know, embezzling tons of money from his law firm. And then they find out, when they review the clothes that Alex was wearing that day, they see that there's a gun spray. A gun spray that can only be produced by if he had shot those guns that day. So they tie him to the murder. And not only that, they review on Paul's phone that Paul has a video when Alex should have been at the grandfather's house. Alex and Maggie's voice can be heard in a video on Paul's phone right around the time of death. So that means that he was not away at his mom and dad's house. He was in the house. He's wearing clothes that have the gun spray. So Alex ultimately gets tied to the crime. He gets tied to embezzlement. He gets tied to financial theft crimes. He gets tied to the murders. He gets tied to everything except Gloria, Stephen, and Mallory's deaths are not in this. I'm talking about only Paul and Maggie. Alex Murdaugh's fall from grace was inevitable. I mean, honestly, everyone in the town said they had seen it coming, but they never knew that he would actually get like this many charges. So he ends up getting 19 indictments and 99 financial crimes charged. They said that would be almost 900 to 1,000 years in prison if he were to serve out every single term that he was charged for. And he's never getting out of jail. He's never getting out of jail. Buster calls him every day. He still says he's innocent. He still said he never did any of these things. And he still really cares about the Murdaugh name. But it's a very interesting situation. Let me know what you guys think. It's a very long one, and I didn't want to go too slow or too fast. So let me know if my talking pace is okay. But I definitely didn't want to be as like up and energetic and happy during this, because this is a very sad story, and it very deeply touched my heart when I was hearing from Anthony during the Netflix documentary. So if you guys want to check out the Netflix documentary, it's so well written and so well told. It's I think it's called The Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal. I think that's the full name. Don't quote me on that. I will have that down in the bio. All of my research links will be down in the bio as well. And as I said, you know, please be safe out there. Please be careful. I really care about you guys. And have a great day, everyone.